Hello, my name is Ahmad Abduljabbar, and I'll be speaking about the hypothalamus. Uh, we'll be speaking about the subdivisions of the hypothalamus, its anatomical location, its nuclei, uh, its connections, and the functions of the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is a very small but extremely important part of the diencephalon, and it plays a crucial role in many important functions, including releasing hormones, daily physiological cycles, controlling appetite, regulating emotional responses, and thermoregulation. And it uses this by playing with these three important triad of effect that a hypothalamus has on. So it has effect on the endocrine system, and it has effect on the autonomic system and the behavioral function via the limbic system. So the hypothalamus is part of the diencephalon, and it occupies the inferior lateral walls of the third ventricle. We're going to go to the next slide. So here, first of all, diencephalon, it can be divided into three: epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. So the epithalamus, it contains the pineal gland and the habenular nuclei. And then there's the thalami, the two thalami, and then the hypothalamus. So the boundaries of the hypothalamus, superiorly, there is the hypothalamic sulcus. So if we look at the, like if we're inside the third ventricle and we're looking at the junction between the thalamus and the hypothalamus, we're going to find a sulcus, and this is called the hypothalamic sulcus. Anteriorly, there is the anterior commissure. This commissure is basically a white matter tract connecting the two temporal lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. And then there is the lamina terminalis, which is a thin sheet of gray matter, and it attaches to the optic chiasm. And then there is inferiorly, there is the infundibulum and the pituitary gland. Posterior to it, as you can see clearly here, here is the midbrain. So right in front of it, there is the hypothalamus. And here is another nice picture. So here's a thalamus. And we have here the hypothalamic sulcus between the thalamus and the hypothalamus. We have here the midbrain. The mammillary body. We're going to speak about it more, but it's important in memory, recollection of memories. Inferior, there is the median eminence and the pituitary gland. And then there is the anterior commissure that connects the temporal lobes, the lamina terminalis, the thin sheet, and the optic chiasm. And here is inside between the two thin sheets of gray matter, and the gray matter is what the nuclei are. Basically, it's a bunch of cell bodies, and it's connected inferiorly, both sides, and in between is the third ventricle. So here is another organization. So it can be divided into the anterior or the supraorbital, middle or tuberal. Tuberal as well, go to the name because here is the mammillary body. We have the mammillary region or the posterior region, middle region, anterior region. So posterior, there is the mammillary body, and we can see the bulging over here, and another bulging here called tuber serinum. And as well, so this part up until the infundibulum over here, the tuber serinum. Here we got the tuberal region or the middle region, and then we have here the anterior supraorbital region. And here we have a nice picture which divides the nuclei based on their regions. So we've got posteriorly, we have the mammillary body, we have the posterior hypothalamic nucleus, part of the mammary region. And then in blue, there is a tuberal or middle region. And there is the dorsomedial nucleus, ventromedial nucleus, and arcuate nucleus. And in the supraoptic region, there is the paraventricular nucleus, there is the anterior hypothalamic nucleus, there is the supraoptic and the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And in this picture, it actually has an X region called the preoptic region, and it contains the medial and lateral preoptic nucleus. We'll speak about the nuclei and some of their functions in the later slides. So here we have the inferior aspect of the hypothalamus. So here we have the optic chiasm. Here's the olfactory bulb of the olfactory tract. It's actually important in the limbic system, and limbic system is associated with the hypothalamus. We'll get to that later. So here's the optic chiasm, and we have here the tuber serenum, and from it as well there should be the pituitary gland, the infundibulum. Yeah, you have the infundibulum there. And there's the mammillary bodies. There's two mammillary bodies. So the supraoptic region, which is under the optic chiasm, and then the tuberal region from the tuber serenum, the bulging there, and then there is the mammillary bodies as well, mammillary region or the posterior region. As for the connections of the hypothalamus, we spoke about the triad of the important systems which the hypothalamus is part of and it affects. So there is the limbic system, autonomic system, and the endocrine system, and it has connections with all of those. So the limbic system is a complex system of nerve and networks which regulates emotions, memory, motivation, learning. And and the limbic system, it directly connects the lower brain functions with the higher brain function, which is the forebrain, and which makes us more conscious of the different stimuli. And the different parts, we have the cingulate gyrus, the yellow color, the fornix, the C-shaped tract, the anterior thalamic nuclei. Here's the anterior thalamic nuclei, hypothalamus, which is our topic for today, amygdala, which is found interiorly to the temporal lobe, and hippocampus. So we have four main connections within the limbic system, which is associated with the hypothalamus. So first we have the medial forebrain bundle, and it connects the septal nuclei, olfactory regions, with the hypothalamus and the brainstem. We'll look at the next picture. So here we have the medial forebrain bundle, septal area, and as well olfactory. It takes as well information from the olfactory region, and then it connects with the hypothalamus. And this system is important part of the reward system. So it's involved in integration of reward and pleasure. Next, we have the fornix, which is a C-shaped bundle of nerves in the brain, which act as a major output tract of the hippocampus. Here the fornix connects the hippocampal complex, and it outputs to the and connects to the mammillary bodies of the hypothalamus. So here we have the fornix, so the C-shaped tract. So it connects the hippocampal formation all the way until the mammillary bodies. So this is the fornix. And the fornix is important in recalling memory rather than the recognition of memory. Memory, as I said before, mammillary bodies, it has important part of memory, especially spatial memory locations and so on and so on. We'll speak more about it as well later. So here, the fornix, again, C-shaped tract, which connects the hippocampal formation, hippocampus, to the mammillary bodies, important for recalling memory and its association with different sensory inputs. Here we have the stria terminalis, which connects the amygdala with the hypothalamus. So it's a band of fibers. So it runs along the lateral margin of the ventricle surface of the thalamus. So here we have the amygdala, and we have here the stria terminalis, not through the fornix. Here is the white matter. You can see the fornix, and here the fornix is connected directly with the hippocampus. And then we have here the amygdala connected by stria terminalis into the hypothalamus. So the amygdala sends information to the hypothalamus. What you will notice, the hypothalamus receives a lot of inputs from different connections, and then it has an output response. So as well, so there's a connection between the amygdala and the hypothalamus. We have again here a connection between the hippocampus to the hypothalamus via the mammillary body, as well other parts of the hypothalamus. And we have the septal area and the olfactory region with the hypothalamus. So again, the amygdala connects with the hypothalamus, and the amygdala is important in processing of memory, decision making, and emotional response like fear, anxiety, or even aggression. So it sends these information into the hypothalamus. Finally, we have the mammillothalamic tract. It connects the hypothalamus with the thalamus, the anterior nuclei. So it arises from cells of both of the medial and lateral nuclei of the mammillary bodies, and are directly continued from the fornix. So the mammillary bodies directly or indirectly connects with the amygdala, hippocampus, and thalami. So it as well connects to the anterior thalamic nucleus, and that's the mammillary thalamic tract. And it's important for spatial memory. So spatial memory is memory responsible for recording and recovering information, to plan a course to a location, and to recall the location of an object or the occurrence of an event, or the region where the event has occurred. So spatial memory is necessary for the orientation in the space around us. I added this picture to show you how complex the connections of the limbic system can be. And yeah, so here you can see the hypothalamus receives from multiple outlets. So the medial forebrain bundle, the stria terminalis, the fornix, and the ventral amygdalofugal pathway. So it receives from multiple sides, and then there's the output, either autonomic or endocrine. We're going to speak about the autonomic right after the limbic system. So here again, with the thalamus, it receives sensory inputs. It's a main sensory region. So it receives sensory inputs. It's as well sent to the hypothalamus. Amygdala as well sent to the hippocampus as well. And then the hypothalamus outputs to the pituitary gland as an endocrine release or autonomic regulation. So the autonomic connections, we have the main connection is the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. So the hypothalamus connects to the reticular formation, as well as the vagus nucleus, that on the anterior medial in the spinal cord, the anterior medial cell column, and as well the vagal nuclei and the reticular formation. So the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus, so it originates in the region of the paraventricular nucleus and descends along the medial aspect of the third ventricle through the periaqueductal gray matter into the reticular formation and to the vagal nuclei. So it has effects on the autonomic system, and here covers a lot of the autonomic system. It's not the topic for today, but as well, so you can see it can have some effect on the pupillary constrictors, lacrimal glands, salivary glands, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle as well. So as well the heart rate, the blood pressure, the adrenal glands, and so on and so forth. So it has multiple connections to it. And finally, there is the endocrine connections. So the pituitary gland has two parts. There is the neurohypophysis and the adenohypophysis. So the hypothalamus directly is connected to the neurohypophysis. So here we have the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. We have as well the tuberoinfundibular tract. So the tuberal nuclei, which again, if you remember, tuberal region or the mid region, so the nuclei in the mid region, mainly from the arcuate nucleus and some other nuclei. So it sends some, so it secretes some hormones into the sinuses and the portal veins, and this has effect on the adenohypophysis, and we will see in other pictures how it has effect on the different hormones. And we have here the neurohypophysis, the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. So it is from the paraventricular and the supra-optic nucleus. So the hormone is released from the hypothalamus, but it's stored in the neurohypophysis and is released when is needed, when the hypothalamus detects the need of release. We'll speak about as well the different hormones. So we have here all of the different hormones. This picture is nice because it divides the different levels of hormones. So we have the hypothalamic hormones, which directly affects the pituitary hormone. So here is the here specifically for the anterior pituitary hormone. So we have the dopamine, which has effect on prolactin, and the target, the non-endocrine target, is for the breast. There is the thyrotropin releasing hormone. So it causes the release of thyroid stimulating hormone. So then it affects the endocrine target is the thyroid gland, and you'll get the release of the thyroid hormones. And then you've got the corticotropin releasing hormone, and then it stimulates the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, to release hormone, which affects the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. Then there is the somatostatin, or the growth hormone releasing hormone. And so there is the inhibitory and stimulatory effects, and it causes the release of the growth hormone. It has multiple effects as well on the liver, which release IGFs. And finally, we got the gonadotropin releasing hormone, which as well has effects with the FSH, LH. They are the gonadotropins, and it has effects on the testis and the ovary, and so the androgens, estrogen and progesterone. Here as well we have the neurohypophysis. We spoke about the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei and its connection. So they release the hormone. In this case, they release the releasing hormone. For example, the thyrotropin releasing hormone. They release it into the sinuses, and it reaches the the anterior pituitary gland, and it causes the release. For example, thyrotropin releasing hormones is released, and then it will stimulate the release of the thyroid stimulating hormone, which has effect on the thyroid gland, and then stimulates the release of the thyroid hormones. But in here we have from the paraventricular, and so here again the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei, and here it's from some tubular nuclei, mostly the arcuate nucleus, and some other nuclei. From here we have the release of the ADH or vasopressin, has two different names, and oxytocin. So it releases and it stores here until the time is needed to release. So ADH, important for water balance. It affects the kidneys, sweat gland, and the circulatory system. Oxytocin in the female reproductive system, so triggers uterine contraction during childbirth. So you can see it's important in pregnancy as well. So we have here different effects. So you can see that the hypothalamus is important for all these effects. So the water balance, uterine contraction during childbirth, the production of sex hormones by the gonads, and we have the stimulation of production of sperm and eggs, thyroid hormones, milk production, insulin-like growth factor IGFs, which stimulates growth and higher metabolic rates. And finally, we have the glucocorticoids, which regulate metabolism and stress response. So it has multiple functions. So generally, the function of the hypothalamus, the main role is to keep the body in homeostasis as much as possible. And what does homeostasis mean? It's the balanced bodily state. So the body is always trying to achieve this balance. So the main things, the main functions of the hypothalamus, if we can have in simple words, so behavior and emotional response, limbic system, production of some important hormones in the body. We spoke about it in the slide before. Takes charge of the person's sexual behavior. The regulation, this is a very important one, we'll speak about in the slide soon to come. Thermoregulation, controlling the person's appetite, contribution to the growth and development, sustaining healthy physiological cycle of the body on a daily basis. So it has effect on the body temperature, thirst, appetite, weight control, emotions, sleep cycles, sex drive, childbirth, blood pressure, heart rate, production of digestive juices, balancing bodily fluids. So it has multiple functions. So it's a small part, but it's important in maintaining the balanced bodily state. Here this specifically speaks about the thermoregulation. There's a thermoregulatory center we have in the hypothalamus. We'll see as well in later slide which nuclei as well have effect. So we have again different stimulus. That the homeostasis imbalance happens by increase of body temperature, and then we have different mechanisms of lowering the body temperature and vice versa. And we have finally the different nuclei and specific function. It'll be almost like the revision of the functions of the hypothalamus. So we have here the arcuate nucleus. If you remember, it connects to the sinuses, which releases and to the anterior pituitary gland. So produces a hypothalamic releasing factor like thyrotropin releasing hormone, and as well dopaminergic neurons that inhibit prolactin release as well. We have ventromedial nucleus, so satiety center, hunger. And on the opposite side, we have lateral nucleus, which induces stimulation, inducing eating. We have as well the mammillary body, which receives input from the hippocampus, again by the fornix, projects as well to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, mammillary thalamic tract. So we have fornix, mammillary thalamic tract as well, the different connections of the limbic system. The posterior nucleus, thermal regulation. In this side, it's the conservation of heat. On the other side, we have anterior nucleus, so the posterior nucleus and anterior nucleus, thermoregulation for the dissipation of heat, as well as it has some effect on the parasympathetic nervous system. And dorsomedial nucleus results in obesity, savage behavior. Paraventricular and supraoptic nucleus, important for the Nuno hypothesis for ADH or vasopressin and oxytocin release, regulates the water balance. And finally, we've got the preoptic and suprachiasmatic. Preoptic, it contains the sexually dimorphic nuclei, so it's important in the release of gonadotropic hormones, and the suprachiasmatic, which receives input from the retina and controls the circadian rhythm. And this was the topic about hypothalamus. Hopefully, it was helpful. Thank you.